Well, good morning, and I'd like to welcome everybody to our session today. Thank you, Patrick, for giving us some information and background on the foundation. As we continue on with our webinar today, obviously by the title, we're working on recycled water shutdown test information, and this is what we're going to be spending the rest of our webinar talking about. In way of introductions, my name is Paul Schwartz. I'm the Chief Engineer at the Foundation. So we want to welcome you, and if you have questions throughout the session today, please make sure to provide those to our coordinator, and we'll try to answer those by the end of the session. Our agenda today, we have a lot of things to cover, from talking about definitions and terminology, to rules and regulations, coordination with administrative authorities, shutdown test procedures. We'll actually get into some of the details of preparation, what test, way of selection, actually conducting that cross-connection control test, and then what reporting information may come out of that. So we have a lot of information to cover today, and hopefully we can touch on all of those throughout the session. Just so that we're all starting off on common terminology, we find that in our field of cross-connection control, we know that some of the terminology can be very unique, and we want to make sure that we're communicating effectively and uniformly. When we start dealing with some of the terminology in this specific field, this is where we do find there are some issues that show up regionally. Even in definitions and terminology, when we start talking about recycled water, which may be a very common term, we also find in some of the rules and regulations throughout North America, we'll see the term reclaimed water, reuse water, even gray water in the same context as recycled. However, we normally think of gray water in a totally different vein and normally is considered separate from recycled water. So again, as we go through some of the terminology, we realize for some of our attendees today, depending where you are regionally, you'll see some of the terminology is slightly different. In the way of recycled water, the general definition we normally find is recycled water means water which, as a result of treatment of waste, and that's really the key word there, of a waste stream, is suitable for a direct beneficial use or a controlled use that would not otherwise occur and is therefore considered a valuable resource. And as you can see, as a direct beneficial use, the little note there means that that recycled water has been transported from the point of treatment to the point of use without open discharge. So this is where we find recycled water normally, is easily defined within that context. As compared to gray water, and this is where we find gray water, again, terminology can change dramatically, means the untreated wastewater which has not been contaminated by any toilet discharge. So we find a lot of these areas where gray water includes the wastewater from bathtubs, showers, bathroom wash basins, clothes washing machines, laundry tubs, but does not include kitchen sinks or dishwashers. So this is generally the separation between gray water and recycled water. You'll see the fact that there is no toilet sewage contamination that you may find in the recycled water. Questions always come in with gray water system. Why do we even bother? I mean, once we get rid of that wastewater, why do we want to deal with it, after the fact? Well, for many areas we know the question is why. And here we can see a lovely green grass. Well, it doesn't look so green, it looks awfully brown. And those areas where we've had water shortages, arid areas where irrigation water has been very limited. For those of us here in Southern California, we've lived through several years of dry weather, very limited rain, and our nice green grass looks like this, a brown spot. And this really developed into quite a few of interesting new trades. We find throughout the country the painting of grass to make it look green became a very large new industry in some areas. If we couldn't water the grass to keep it green, well, if we can paint it, at least we can make it look green. So this became kind of a byproduct of some of these areas where we had limitations to our irrigation. Well, because of these issues. Not everybody wanted to paint their lawn. We did find a greater use of gray water capturing systems. And on a residential level, this is where we find quite frequently this would take place. And here's an illustration actually out of a plumbing code document showing a vessel capturing that gray water at a residence. And then that would be used where the incoming discharge would come into a collection tank and then be used as a subterranean irrigation, which means it would be somewhat of a leach field where it would not be applied topically on the top of the ground. So gray water systems have become used in a great number of areas now as just a politically correct way of reusing our resources, where we're finding gray water systems. We find documents such as illustrated here where some agencies, utilities, state agencies will put out pamphlets and brochures showing how a resident can secure that wastewater stream, use it as within a gray water system on a local basis. Of course, there's always concern as does the homeowner really know how to do this correctly and safely. Those of us in the cross-connection control industry realize that a homeowner may not clearly understand that interconnecting potable water with a gray water system is a potential problem. Some of these documents go through and kind of show in a little more detail specifically, what areas can be used and those areas that should not be used. So these brochures are available from a variety of agencies, and we find it's been very helpful to the homeowner to fully understand what is a gray water system. So as we find these systems being used more and more, we find the cross-connection control personnel with an uphill battle, because a lot of these systems are not done with permits. People may read about them and install them, and then down the road we find problems. So gray water systems are increasing in numbers. We also find that when we start talking about recycled water or gray water, public perception becomes very interesting. We have found in areas that may have just very casually used the term toilet to tap to indicate we are treating the wastewater and reusing it in some positive way, taken by the public was taken totally, very poorly. Whereas some people assume there's this little illustration here showing somebody drinking toilet water. Of course, that was never the intent. But again, the public perception of recycled water and gray water was greatly misunderstood. And this is where we found a lot of educational information may not have been provided as early on into some of these programs to get people to understand. Again, sometimes we can find that the public perception is one that is an uphill battle for many of you, as I'm sure you've tried to implement recycled water, gray water systems, and of course with cross-connection control work, we find that people don't always understand clearly. When we're starting to deal with recycled water, again, the public's perception is what is really going on. We don't have time today to go through all the various treatment requirements. We know, depending where many of you are from, recycled water may have various grades of treatment. Generally, as we see the amount of treatment from primary, secondary to tertiary and advanced treatment, the actual water quality increases significantly. Does it approach potable water standards? Generally, most health departments will say no. So this is where you may not find it a direct potable water reuse, but there are areas that are blending recycled water, in some specific locations. So getting people to understand what recycled water is and how it can be used is an important aspect of the whole program. We do find in some areas and some regulations they will have different tiers or grades of recycled water which can be used. And the chart here was just taken from a state regulation showing the various grades that can be used for different specific applications. So this is where we find that recycled water across North America can vary tremendously on how it's treated and how it's used. But those of us in cross-connection control still have to look at it as a specific hazard, and we have to guard against it appropriately.